and welcome to Brick by Brick, a brand new podcast for the property development industry. My name's Zoe Kiff and I'm the Director of Communications here at Brickflow and one of your hosts. Each week we're going to be speaking to experts and stakeholders from across the property development sector. They'll share ideas and advice on how to get ahead of the game as a developer, as well as trends and insights from across the sector. This series is designed for all experience levels, so whether you're starting out on your property development journey or you're an industry veteran, we're going to be handpicking topics with universal appeal. Before we get started, I wanted to share some of the inspiration behind the series. Every property developer experiences a different journey. Let's face it, no one leaves school to be a property developer. We all do something else first, and property development is usually a bit of a side hustle. If we're good at it, we do more of it, and then eventually some of us become full-time. The point is, we all have different experiences and knowledge. There's no right or wrong way to be a property developer, but no matter how big or successful you are, there's still things that you can learn from others. Like a development project itself, we're all building brick by brick. Each day we lay a new brick, and if we lay the bricks in the right place and at the right time, we get closer to where we want to be. Property development is rarely a solo effort and normally involves different partners who share ideas and skills. Brick by Brick is an extension of that. We want people to collaborate and help each other, to build a community. It's the only way we're going to address the UK's chronic shortage in housing supply. We'd also love to share the podcast with your development industry network. Our mission is to make development finance better. The current system is well and truly broken. Every year, somewhere between a third and a half of SME property developers cite lack of finance as one of the main reasons that they don't build anymore. It's only through raising awareness of the problems that developers face that we're going to improve this situation. The more people who hear about this, the more the industry will pay attention and the better it will be for all of us. So please share as far and wide as you can. We also want you to join in the conversation. If you have any suggestions for future topics or guests, or thoughts on any of the podcasts, we would love to hear from you. Please get in touch through LinkedIn or Facebook, or email us at podcast@brickflow.com. I hope you enjoy the show. So to kick off the series, I'm delighted to welcome Ian Humphreys and Robert Lange, two of the founders of Brickflow and the UK's first search engine for development finance, allowing you to search and apply for loans 24/7 from your phone or laptop. Head to brickflow.com to check out the finance options for your next development. So today we're going to talk about some of the challenges that property developers face and how Brickflow is trying to tackle them. So here we go. Welcome Ian and Robert.
Hi Zoe, thanks for having us.
So we'd like to start the programme with you introducing yourselves and telling us a bit about your background and your career to date, but also what attracted you to the property sector in the first place and why you love what you do. Ian?
Yeah, I do love what I do. I started in property finance accidentally. I left university. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in London and in finance, but nothing more specific than that. It was actually a university friend of mine that introduced me to a company called Alexander Hall, which is where I started and learned the property finance ropes. It was a great starting place. I really enjoyed it there. Really good training. I think I was there for just about 5 years. And then I left to join a couple of other guys that I'd worked with. They'd set up their own business. We specialised in higher end and more complex transactions. And we worked with some pretty serious property entrepreneurs, so developers, investors, from all around the world, really. It was a fantastic experience, learning how to start and build a business. And we grew from 4 people to around 15 or 20 when I left, which was about 6 years ago. I then set up my own business and carried on working with similar clients, but very much had one eye on the development of technology in the residential mortgage space. That was something that was really interesting to me. It was becoming really efficient through technology, but the commercial and development finance markets were still so archaic and had zero adoption of technology. I then became a property developer myself for a little bit of time. I built some of my own properties for a few years, and I went through that experience that our borrowers face as well. So being a developer and funding property developments. And I think it was those experiences together with my interest in the future and how technology was being used in other sectors that led me to wanting to innovate in the commercial real estate sector. However, to answer your question, one of the reasons I love what I do is undoubtedly the people you meet. No two projects are the same, no two borrowers are the same, and learning about people's journeys in property is absolutely fascinating to me. Learning how people have got to where they've got to, the hardships, the sacrifices, and then seeing them become successful. So real life stories is what I'm all about. I also love sharing. So the whole idea of Brickflow is to help borrowers access better finance, but also hopefully to understand the market as a whole better so they can be more successful. So we want to share our ideas, our knowledge, our experience of the commercial real estate sector, and help people on their journey. We want people to come away from Brickflow enriched, basically. So not only knowing more about finance, but hopefully more about everything to do with property development.
Sounds like it's all come together at the right time then.
Yeah, the tech's there. I think we can use it to our advantage.
That's great, thank you, Ian. And how about you, Robert?
I've been in software development through university, and ever since then, I've written software in every sector there is, from e-commerce and telecommunications, but they're primarily in engineering and finance, because there are two sides to what I do. It's taking business ideas, understanding them and implementing them in software, usually quite complex algorithms, calculations, that kind of thing, particularly in the finance sectors. I've been attracted to the commercial finance, the development finance area, because of the sort of coming together of both the people side and the different situations people find themselves in, and trying to turn that into code algorithms which will help them out.
Great, sounds like clever stuff. Thanks for that, guys. So now I want to move on to Brickflow, just to chat about the software. The two of you have obviously come together to develop it. So what I would like to know is, why did you create it, and what are the problems that you're trying to solve with it?
Yeah, okay. So the primary problem we see in development finance space is access. It's not choice. There's actually lots of lenders. We estimate around 50 at any one point in time, depending on the economic climate, etc. But most developers don't know more than a few, or know how to find them. So most developers seem to find a lender either through other developer friends, through a broker, or through other channels. And there's nothing wrong with any of those, but most borrowers don't seem to understand that loan offers will vary hugely from lender to lender. I'll let Robert explain a bit more about how development finance is calculated and the algorithms and maths that underpin Brickflow. But essentially, if you speak to 10 different lenders about the same site, you will get 10 different answers, loan amounts, loan pricing. So our job, like any search engine, is to show you as many answers as possible and organize them in a way that makes sense.
So that sounds like half of the developers are actually missing out on a huge opportunity. So can you just expand a little bit on that a bit further, in terms of that every lender a borrower speaks to will give a different answer?
Yeah, sure. So every lender has different criteria that they have to satisfy. They'll also have different niches. So some lenders prefer different sectors, different geographies than others. So they vary by loan size, leverage, geography, and asset type. They're the four main ones, but that's not an exhaustive list. So as an example, if I have a site in the southeast of England and I'm building 20 apartments and I ask 10 lenders what I can borrow, every one of those lenders will come back with a different loan size and a different loan price. The differences can be huge as well. So by only speaking to 1, 2, 3 lenders, there's a very small chance I have the best deal, both in terms of pricing and or leverage. If I rank those loans in order, I will normally have one lender that will lend me the most money, and they will generally be the most expensive because they're taking the most risk. I will then have smaller loan amounts for the next 9 lenders, normally accompanied by cheaper pricing. However, it doesn't always work like that. Yeah. The borrower's job is to strike the balance between price and leverage to find the loan that works best for them and gets them the best return on their equity. But to speak to 10 lenders every time you're interested in a site is impossible. It takes too much time. So to get 10 lenders to quote development finance would take most people weeks or months. So Brickflow aids them in that process by giving instant visibility as to which loans are available and putting them in order. Right. Essentially, like any other search engine, you ask a question, which in this case is how much can I borrow and at what price? And Brickflow provides you with the answers, or in this case, loans.
Perfect. So it's a bit like Money Supermarket then, but for development finance.
Yeah, yes and no, but for those that haven't seen Brickflow, then that would help you understand how it looks.
So why yes and no?
Well, we're very keen not to have loan price and loan size as the only determining factors as to why someone would choose a particular loan or lender on Brickflow. For simple products like car or pet insurance, price could be the only factor people are interested in. But development finance is a lot more nuanced than that. And there are a lot more factors to consider, such as the speed, how good the service is, ease of working with that chosen lender, their process, and many others.
That all makes sense. But Money Supermarket tells me about other factors. So, for example, which insurance has free legal cover, roadside assistance, and is that not the same?
Yeah, no, I guess so, although some of our factors are more subjective, so it's not quite the same, and we don't show that yet. So I guess we'd show that in the future.
Right. Okay. So back to where we were. We now understand that there are potentially 10 different lenders, all with different loan amounts and criteria and pricing on the same site, but you mentioned that there are other criteria and niches to be aware of.
Yeah, correct. So if you take the same site and move it from the southeast of England to the northwest of England or to Scotland, for example, then the order of lenders, the amount they would lend, and the pricing would change again.
Right.
Similarly, if I reduce the block of 20 apartments to 10 apartments or increase it to 40 apartments, everything would change again. If I change the asset type from residential to a hotel or student accommodation, then again, everything changes. So if my land purchase price or my build costs increase or decrease by 50 or 100K, then again, everything changes. So essentially, any variable that changes will change the lender and the loan options that are best for you.
Right, and you'll get instant results back after you tweak those variables.
Exactly, yeah. You can change the loaning system, change the variables, and we'll feedback immediately as to what the best loans are.
Wow. So pretty much every project a property developer looks at would have different lenders that offer the biggest loan or the best price each time?
Correct. The development finance market and the method of calculating development finance are incredibly dynamic. The current method of finding development finance is very static, and the two don't match. So as an example, if I ask a lender for their best offer on a Monday, their answer could be different by Tuesday. There are things that go on in the background that we would never see. Right. So, for example, a lender will normally have restrictions on how much they can lend in one geography, one region, and or in one particular asset class. So if you're borrowing to build a hotel, for instance, then the lender, let's say the lender breaches the threshold in that sector in between your first conversation and then when you apply for the loan a month later, they may no longer be able to help you, or they might be just less competitive.
So that's why you say by only speaking to one or two lenders, you're likely to have a much lower chance of finding the next deal.
Exactly. I think if someone only speaks to one lender, the chances of it being the best deal are close to zero.
Wow. So that's Brickflow's potentially a bit of a game changer then. Okay, thanks for that, Ian. So moving on to Robert, can you tell us a bit more about how the system works and the technology behind it?
Sure, yeah. As Ian explained, there are lots of different factors that need to be considered. There are really four main ones: the loan to cost, the loan to the gross development value, the day one loan constraint, and the minimum equity, client equity contribution. There's lots of rules around these, and each lender has different rules. As Ian said, the rules change. They change with the asset type, the loan size, the geography, etc. So we need to build a system which would adapt to all of these, which was not easy. I think we originally started talking about that 3 years ago, and it's taken to where we are today to get as many factors in as we had. The maths is quite complicated, and a number of attempts been made with some mathematicians who didn't quite get there. But in the end, we've got the model we need, and that's where we're at.
Perfect. So why is it so complicated?
I suppose the main reason is getting the loans into the right order with the right presentation has been the biggest problem. Most lenders, if you approach them, will have their calculations, but they all work forwards stepwise from where you are, whereas we have to reverse engineer everything backwards to produce what we need.
Oh God, sounds like clever stuff. So how does it work with lenders? They give you their criteria and then you do the calculations for each loan?
Yes, each search is new calculations, and these can change over time. You can search on a Monday, but the lending criteria can change overnight, so you'll get different answers on a Tuesday. So the information is current. Where you have your data for your search, that's all saved on the dashboard, and each time you look at the results, you'll get the live information. What you've got is up to date.
Wow. Okay. So what do you think is the biggest value add that Brickflow provides?
Brickflow, we talk about the concept of the development finance paradox. With most financial products, really what you're after is the cheapest, because cheapest is best. You want the cheapest mortgage, the cheapest insurance, that sort of thing. With development finance, that's usually a false economy. Property development, you'll get a multiplier effect on your inputs, your time and your equity, and you need to be efficient with those. So let's take an example where we have something that's going to cost 3.6 million to build and the gross development value of 5 million. If I decide to build that with cash, then I have a profit of 1.4 million. But that's putting in 3.6 million of my own money in, and my return on capital is very low. And there's usually very few people who are in a position to do that. If I take the finance and I can then increase my return on capital. So different lenders will want different things. Some want a 30% deposit, some lenders a 10% deposit. So if I put in 30%, 1.2 million, then I can get some cheaper debt from the mainstream, and finance costs are about 200k. So I make 1.2 million profit, or a 100% return. And I still have to come up with quite a lot of money. However, if I put in a 10% deposit, that's probably about 400,000. And the same for the finance cost, another 400,000. I'm making very slightly less, but that's making $1 million. But the return on the capital is 250%. And so with this, if you took two developers, gave them exactly the same starting conditions, and one of them goes with low leverage and the other one higher leverage, after the time they've been through a cycle of 3 developments, then one of them is going to be a lot further ahead in terms of what project sizes and profitability they're going to, what level they're going to be at.
Yeah, so right, that's really interesting. So essentially looking at more lenders, can potentially make the project much more successful.
Yes, although that's only one variable. There's plenty of other factors to play. The economy, what happens if there's a road contractor not paying the right price for the land, and so forth.
And that's if you're measuring success by profit. But a lot of developers do that.
I was going to say, surely that's the measure for most property developers.
But I think the point is that time is one thing that none of us have an endless supply of. So, if you're going through the cycle into, if it's a 2-year development cycle, you want to maximize your returns each time. And most people don't want to be developers when they're 70 or 80. So you only have a finite time, really, and finite number of times you can do this. So you really want to maximize your return each time.
Right. So leverage really is king then.
Yeah.
So the more I borrow, the bigger my multiplier effect. Is that how it works, Robert?
To a point, yes. Although at some stage you're going to be, if you're borrowing too much, it's going to cost you a lot more. If you're going to pay another 150,000 to borrow an extra 100,000, it makes very little sense. But on Brickflow, it's all laid out and illustrated so that the borrowing costs are there and the profitability and deposit you need to pay, and you can strike the right balance between what's good for you and where the best loan is.
So the search engine, so Brickflow will essentially do all of that for you.
Yes, we've worked hard to make it to do those things and to present it clearly and concisely.
It always sounds too good to be true. I think this is really quite a game changer for the market. So what happens next? So I found a loan. Where do I go now?
We display the results, and you can see what's there. You say, this looks nice. That's likely to change because we're working on a number of assumptions at the beginning, and as you go further into the process, it will get more precise, and you provide more information about the particular site and your particular circumstances and so forth. But you can then narrow that down and get some loan terms and agree that loan. Ian's probably better to explain that than I am. Ian?
Yeah. So once someone's found a loan, they're then encouraged to apply and go through what we call a pre-app. So pre-app's a term that most developers will be familiar with. We ask borrowers to provide more information on their development experience, their development appraisal, and the property schedule. We pull through all the information from the initial search, so you're not double keying, you're just adding to what's already there. And then this information is sent on to the chosen lender for review. The lender takes a look through that information, does their initial checks and due diligence, and confirms they're still interested based on the further information, and then provides a final quote. So that might be slightly different to what was on the system. It might be slightly more, it might be slightly less. But the idea is that they come back with their final offer, which, if that is acceptable to the borrower, then we move to the next stage, which is the sort of full application and credit approval. And that's at that point we charge as a platform £995 to make that application for credit approval. But that's refundable in the event that the loan isn't approved. And then we manage the loan to completion for the client. So all the documents can be uploaded onto the platform and sent securely to the lender. So there's no paper. There's everything's very slick and very easy. We've done manual development finance applications before, and it's not something we ever want to go back to, if I'm honest. It's horrendous.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I'm sure the developers listening to this this will be music to their ears. So to summarise, you're offering developers clarity, but also by having a digital process, then presumably it's much quicker and easier to apply?
Yeah, as you know, Zoe, some lenders still want paper applications, and some won't accept Dropbox, so we have to send them all the documentation stacked like this sometimes through the post. I mean, it really is. It's back to the Stone Age with some lenders. So we're really trying to force change in the market.
I think I remember you saying when I first started on this project, and it was just mind blowing that these guys hadn't come into the digital age.
Some are better than others, and some are getting there. But as a whole, yeah, it's probably one of the last industries to be untouched by technology.
And you also say that the average loan completion time is 6 months.
There are a lot of things that are outside the lender's control with regards to completing the loan quickly. Satisfying planning conditions is one example. There is also a huge number of people involved in the process. So 2 quantity surveyors, several lawyers, a bank valuer. All of them have a pivotal role to play, and you only need one of them to go on holiday and the whole system breaks down. However, some lenders don't help themselves. There is plenty of technology available that could make the whole process better, but it's not being used. It's like the last 20 years just hasn't happened in this sector.
Oh, God. Basically, you think the industry is very ready for a change?
Reluctantly, some people think. Others are very enthused. But I think it has to be, really. The current system is really broken. If you speak to anyone, any stakeholders, so lenders, borrowers, brokers, agents, they'll all tell you the same thing. for me, other than maybe the planning system, finance is probably the biggest contributor to the chronic shortage of housing in the UK. If we solve that problem, then it's good for everyone's benefit. Anyone involved in the industry is doing more business, so that's good for the economy. And ultimately, if there isn't a housing shortage, then everyone in the UK will have access to accommodation that they can afford. We see our role as a business is to help the whole industry be better and more efficient. If developers had true visibility of the finance market, I think we could hit the annual housing targets easily for the next 5 to 10 years and address the shortage we have.
Okay, so we're approaching the end of the show. So there's one final thing I wanted to ask you both, which is, what are your biggest hopes for Brickflow? Should we start with Ian?
I think it's pretty much what I said at the start. The hope really is that we can help people be more successful, help people be better developers, and that isn't we're not going to find them better sites or teach them how to build, but really everything starts with the finance. If you make a bad decision on the finance, you're chasing your tail all the way through the deal. If you pay too much for your finance, or you have to get investors where you're paying profit shares, or you don't borrow enough, it means you're doing smaller sites. All of these things are built around the finance, and I think it has such a huge knock-on impact. But for most developers, it's really a secondary consideration. They find a site, they know what they can build and how much it's going to sell for, and they find a builder, and it's almost like, oh, and what about the finance? So it really should be the first thing that you look at. And that's how a lot of people use Brickflow as well, is for they will run through sites through the software and won't bother going to see sites that aren't coming up to the numbers they need on Brickflow. So rather than going wasting your time seeing 10 sites, of which 8 you could never afford based on the deposit level you have, you just go and see the 2 that you can do because you've run the numbers through Brickflow. So it creates more opportunities, it creates more awareness. It allows people to set their sites higher. A lot of people are surprised by how much you can borrow sometimes on sites. If the numbers align, then and lenders really fancy a site, you can really mobilize big sites, with big profit margins with very small deposits. So hopefully everyone that uses it comes away knowing more about finance, but just knowing more about the industry, and hopefully can be more successful as a result.
What you guys have said, it sounds like an absolute game changer for the market and a really exciting piece of technology. Robert, so what are your hopes for Brickflow?
My biggest hopes are really about seeing sort of it become the standard for developers to go to. We'll extend it to make the process smoother, provide more value in terms of added in terms of what it's doing for you as a developer, and just reaching everybody, and it just becomes the Brickflow as a verb. Brickflow is the thing to do for your finance and for the whole process.
And I think that's what I've got from today. I think you've given us a really great insight into how you two have come together to develop the software. And the real difference that it can make for developers as well. It sounds as though this is going to be an absolute game changer, and I, for one, have been excited to be involved in the project. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. Stay safe until the next time, and if you want to get in touch about today's topics or anything else, then please reach out to us through the company pages on LinkedIn or Facebook, or email us directly at podcast@brickflow.com. I've been Zoe Kiff, Director of Communications at Brickflow and host of Brick by Brick, the podcast for the property development industry. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Brick by Brick. It's been really great to understand the thinking behind Brickflow, and hopefully you can relate to some of the issues that Ian and Robert spoke about. Over the next few episodes, we're going to be talking to property professionals from across the board bringing their stories to life and discussing tricks and tips to optimise your own future projects. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you'd leave us a review and share this podcast to your property peers. Until next time, take care.